All right, let's get right into it. There's a conflict happening as we speak, but it's totally invisible. It's being fought on a battlefield that is quite literally the entire globe. We're talking about a silent, relentless struggle between nations that's all happening online. And that right there is the huge question. It's really the core of what we're breaking down today. Because when the battlefield is cyberspace, the old rulebook just gets thrown out the window. So, who's going to write the new one? Okay, so first things first, we've got to understand the terrain. Cyberspace isn't just another front, It's a whole new world of conflict, a kind of digital Wild West, where the line between war and peace gets really, really blurry. And this is the part you really have to get. We're not talking about tanks rolling across borders or jets in the sky. This is what experts call persistent engagement, a constant, simmering, low-level fight for an edge. It's everything from spying to steal trade secrets to probing critical infrastructure, the kind of thing that could make a city's lights flicker, and of course, launching influence campaigns on social media. None of this is enough to start a traditional war, but make no mistake, it is absolutely changing the global balance of power. At the very heart of this whole conflict are two completely different ideas about what the internet should even be. On one side, you have the US and its allies who are pushing for an open, free, global internet for everyone. But on the other side, you've got powers like China, who see the internet through a lens of state sovereignty. For them, it's a digital space that needs to be controlled, even walled off, to protect national security. And this fundamental clash of visions, it's the main reason we can't get any kind of global agreement on the rules of the road. So how is the United States dealing with this new reality? Well, for a long time, the strategy was purely defensive. Built a bigger, stronger digital wall. But that just wasn't cutting it against these constant low-level attacks. So they've made a pretty fundamental shift in their thinking to something much more proactive. And that brings us to this key concept: defend forward. The idea is pretty simple, actually. Instead of just sitting back and waiting for an attack to hit US networks, the plan is to go out into the adversary's networks, see what they're up to, and shut down threats right at the source. It's all about taking the fight to them before they can ever bring it to us. Now, this matrix does a fantastic job of laying out the massive gamble this strategy really is. See, the best-case scenario is up there in the top left. The US gains power and cyberspace actually becomes more stable. Great. But look at the other possibilities. The strategy could also lead to the US being more powerful, sure, but in a much less stable and more chaotic world. Or, and this is the worst-case scenario down in the bottom right, the whole thing could just completely backfire, leaving the US less powerful and the world less stable, maybe because it provokes our adversaries into escalating things. It's a high-stakes game. All right, so that's the muscle. But let's talk about the other half of the strategy, diplomacy. Because you can't just fight your way to a stable internet. You have to negotiate. And right now, that front is facing some really serious headwinds. To lead this diplomatic charge, the U.S. State Department created a brand new office, the Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, or CDP for short. This was supposed to be the central command for all American cyber diplomacy, one strong, unified voice to help negotiate the rules for this new digital age. But, and this is a big but, here's where the story takes a turn. The Bureau launched in April 2022 with a ton of fanfare. But just a few years later, by mid-2025, reports started surfacing that this critical diplomatic body was actually being broken up as part of a big internal reshuffle. And experts were quick to point out the problem here. This move could seriously cripple America's ability to lead on the world stage. Think about it. Just as the need for clear rules in cyberspace becomes more urgent than ever, the U.S. might be taking its star diplomatic player off the field. So, if the big superpowers like the US and China are kind of stuck in a stalemate, who fills that vacuum? Well, a whole different group of nations is stepping up to try and build some consensus from the ground up. Let's take a look at the rise of the so-called middle powers. First up, you have countries that act as reliable, neutral partners. The Netherlands is a perfect example. They've made themselves into an honest broker, hosting global conferences and really getting everyone talking to find common ground on very specific things, like how to protect the basic public core of the internet. They can talk to everybody, and that helps bridge some of these huge divides. Next, you've got the norm entrepreneurs. These are the trailblazers. Take Estonia. After getting hit by some absolutely massive cyber attacks back in 2007, they basically transformed themselves into a world leader in cybersecurity. And they've used that hard-won expertise to pioneer new international standards, pushing for things like the Tallinn Manual, which is basically the closest thing we have to a guidebook on cyber conflict. And finally, there are the coalition builders. Singapore is fantastic at this. They've skillfully used regional groups like ASEAN to create momentum. They got the entire region to agree to the UN's norms for responsible online behavior, which created this powerful voting bloc and became a model for other parts of the world to follow. And this really gets to the core difference in their strategies, right? The great powers are mostly playing a zero-sum game. They're trying to impose their vision to get a leg up. The middle powers, on the other hand, are playing a totally different, constructive game. They're all about finding common ground, promoting norms, and building coalitions to try and create a more stable digital world for everyone. Okay, let's just zoom out one last time. Why is this new domain so incredibly hard to manage? Well, it might be because we lack a basic, fundamental understanding of how it even works. For centuries, we've had foundational theories of traditional warfare, from brilliant minds like Clausewitz and Sun Tzu. But for cyber warfare, there's just nothing like that. We're still trying to figure out the most basic principles and dynamics of what cyber conflict even is. We're kind of writing the book as we go. And this framework here gives you a little taste of the complexity we're dealing with. It shows how cyber conflict is happening on all these different levels at the same time. A big decision at the very top policy level, like forming an alliance, trickles all the way down to influence a strategic campaign, which then guides an operational plan, and finally determines the specific things some operator types on a keyboard. It's all connected. And that brings us to maybe the weirdest challenge of all, paradoxical logic. Here's an easy way to think about it. If you build a taller wall, you might just be encouraging your attacker to learn how to fly. In cyberspace, adding more defenses can actually create brand new, unexpected holes. And winning one little battle, like hacking a single server, means almost nothing in the grand scheme of things. It's a bizarre, counterintuitive world where your normal common sense just doesn't apply. So, we end up right back where we started, in this strange new battlefield defined by invisible attacks and paradoxical logic. The race is on. Who is going to successfully write the rulebook for our digital age? Will it be the great powers trying to force their will on everyone else? Or will it be the middle powers patiently building consensus from the ground up? The answer to that question is going to shape the future of security for all of us.